Hey everyone, welcome back to our next chapter, our next ongoing exploration, or in our ongoing exploration, I should say, of the story by Randy Frazee. Welcome back. This one is well timed as we are hitting Palm Sunday and going into the events of Holy Week to be looking at this particular chapter, which is number 26, entitled The Hour of Darkness. This chapter zeroes in on the tail end of what we know as Holy Week, specifically the events stemming pretty much from the Last Supper through Jesus' death on the cross. Depending on the version that you are reading in terms of the different Gospels, this covers roughly a 24 to 36 hour period. The fancy name for this, I believe I actually mentioned last week, is the Triduum, which I think is Latin for the 3 days, but that is kind of what this is about. Once again, we have a mixture through this chapter of all 4 Gospels, though John is featured very heavily, followed by Matthew in terms of the main focal points. Smaller bits from Mark and Luke are also featured in there. We have events beginning with the preparation for the Last Supper, aka the Passover, and we have the meal itself, and within the meal there are 3 main points. We hear about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. That is featured in John's Gospel only. Then we have the institution of Holy Communion. That is present in all 3 of the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, though the version that we have here is from Matthew. And then we go into a long time of teaching, also from John. This is known by scholars as the Farewell Discourse and goes on for several chapters within John's Gospel. Moving on from the meal, then we have the events within the garden, a big mix of the different Gospels here, similar to what we saw with the Transfiguration a chapter or 2 ago, in that it's like a couple of lines from one and a couple of lines from the next one and a couple of lines from the next one, and just kind of goes over and over again. Excuse me, a little tickle in my throat there. Moving on from there, then we have the trial, both with the Jewish religious leaders and then with Pontius Pilate. And that includes information about Barabbas and the desire for Pilate to release someone, and everyone asks for Barabbas. Now, in certain things that I have read, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I have read it. Some say that Barabbas's first name was Jesus, so he was Jesus Barabbas, which might try and explain like, oh, hey, who do you want released? And we've got these 2 individuals. But what's interesting about it is Barabbas is described as an insurrectionist, which is the same thing that Jesus is ultimately killed for. Insurrection against Rome. That's why he was crucified. More on that in a bit. Then we have the crucifixion itself right up until the point of Jesus' death. Then the chapter cuts off, and when the next chapter picks up, before we move into the resurrection, we actually have the tail end of that event, the dealing with Jesus' body and his placement in the tomb and things of that nature. So that's how far we go in this chapter. Some clarification is needed on a couple of different things within this chapter. So, one thing that I think is worth noting, which leads to a bit of speculation, and then some actual correction that I need to put in terms of the book. So, first of all, John's Gospel shifts a lot of this action forward 1 day in the week. The Last Supper is not Passover in John's Gospel, as Jesus is actually crucified on the day of preparation, aka the day that they slaughter the lambs for the Passover. Now, sometimes you can kind of pick up on this, and sometimes it's easy to sort of miss that, but John's Gospel places these events 24 hours earlier. So the Last Supper is Wednesday night, and then Jesus dies on Thursday, as opposed to the Synoptic Gospels that have that happening Thursday night and into Friday. It is worth noting, though, that the resurrection lines up in all 4 Gospels happening on Sunday morning. So if you're reading John's Gospel, that may be where the idea of the 3 days comes from. That's oftentimes where some questions come up. Well, if he dies on Friday and then he's resurrected on Sunday, that's not really 3 days. What's going on with that? I think that could be where this comes from. But that is just worth noting. And it may, here's the speculation point, this may explain the difference in the action that we see in the different accounts of the Last Supper. Again, in John's Gospel, it's the washing of the disciples' feet. In the other 3 Gospels, it's the institution of Holy Communion. It's possible that there were 2 different meals that are described within these 2, within the different Gospel accounts. I don't know that's what's going on. It's possible that John just had a different focal point, but possible. So Okay, that's a clarification there. Okay, sorry. Still got some throat stuff going on. Um, Next thing, now we're going to move into some correction. Most of the time, I'm a pretty big fan of what Frazee did in putting this together and including the little snippets that are connective points, kind of hitting over some of the important plot points that happen between sections. Normally, he does a pretty good job with that. There's a couple of things that I really take issue with in this particular one. There's a transitional paragraph that happens between the foot washing and the institution of Holy Communion. And there's some ambiguity. Now, in John's gospel, once the foot washing is over and Jesus kind of talks about one of you will betray me, he actually really seems to single out Judas, and Judas leaves. That is only present in John's gospel in terms of Judas actually leaving. There's some of the identification type situation, but Judas only leaves mid-meal in John's gospel. Now, in what Frazee wrote, he actually even says after Judas leaves, Jesus goes into the whole Holy Communion thing. And that is not accurate. Judas is present in Matthew, Mark, and Luke when Jesus institutes Holy Communion. So Frazee is wrong to not clarify that properly. So I just want to really hammer that point, that is an error. Judas was around and received communion from Jesus just like everybody else did. So that's the first thing. Now there's another one, and this one is not so much inaccurate as I don't know what to think of it. There's another spot in the connecting paragraph when Peter is following Jesus through the various points in his trial, just before the three denials, the times when he denies Jesus. And in what Frazee wrote, there's kind of an indicator that like Peter is plotting plan B. And what are they going to do? And while he doesn't come out and say it, it almost gives the implication like Peter's trying to figure out how to free Jesus. And we have no indication that actually happened beyond he was just curious and he wanted to see what happened. And he's following along that way. There is no indication within the Gospels that Peter was plotting something in order to try and free Jesus. So that one is not as implicit, like the one with Judas, that was flat out wrong. This one, I just don't know what I think of that. So I just wanted to point out those things. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, and this is not necessarily something that makes me go, sorry, again, allergies are fun. The last thing I want to talk about is crucifixion itself. This is something, when I'm teaching it in confirmation, I always think is worth really, really focusing in on. And when we bump into this in various teaching moments, it's really worth taking the time to recognize just how extremely brutal crucifixion was. Keep in mind, it is intended by the Romans to be a torturous, long, ongoing example of what happens when you rise up against the Romans. Now, executions were very, very common in the Roman Empire, but not everyone who was executed was crucified. A lot of people were, but not everybody. Crucifixion was intended to show everyone else, this is what happens to you if you actually rise up against us. If you do something else that deserves death penalty, they would just behead you or kill you with a sword or whatever. Crucifixion was intended to be ongoing, brutal, and an example. Now, what happens? You're nailed up literally from your wrists. Now, we always hear about holes in his hand. That's not accurate. Gravity is a thing. And if you have holes nailed through your hand, gravity is going to tear your hand down through and rip that off. So it's actually a nail through the wrist below these connective bones. So you're hanging from your wrist. And of course, your arms are stretched clear out. Now, this puts pressure on your chest cavity, a lot of pressure from gravity holding you down. And enough pressure that you actually cannot breathe. So there are two options here. One, the person could pull themselves up or try and pull themselves up with arm strength against the brace of those nails in their wrists and try and catch a breath. But there are limits to how long that would last because the person's arm strength is going to run out real, real fast. And it's also possible that all that work of doing that would actually tear your arms away from the nails and such. So that would so that's where your feet come in. Keep in mind, Jesus' feet are also nailed, and you're nailed with just enough bend in your knees. Your legs are not stretched fully out. that you can that you can use your strength from your legs, which are going to last longer, push down against the anchor of that nail, so against the thing that's literally holding you on there. It also is saving your life because that pressure, that lifting would lift up your body just enough, take the pressure off your arms and your chest cavity for you to grab a gasping breath and then hang back down again. And that is essentially there to keep you alive longer. Remember, this is intended to take a long time to be an example. Crosses were often outside the town along the road that people would travel. So not just people in the community, but anybody walking by would be like, oh man, we don't want to do that. So what's the last thing I want to say? Last thing I want to say about that. So again, remember, this is supposed to take a lot of time. And while the chapter cuts off before we hear about the breaking of the legs of the other two criminals, actually that picks up in the next chapter right at the beginning, that would have been considered a mercy. If your legs are broken, you no longer can push down against that nail to lift yourself up and take a breath. So it allows you to suffocate, aka it allows you to die. The breaking of the legs would be considered a mercy. Jesus is on the cross, depending on which one we're reading, which gospel we're reading, anywhere from like 3 to 9 hours. And that was actually a pretty short duration. Normally this would take way, way longer than that. And that's why Pilate is surprised to learn that Jesus is already dead. Those are some little details that we pick up on. So crucifixion, brutal. And as bad as you think it is, it's worse. It's just brutal, brutal, bad. And that is what Jesus endured. That's everything I have. I'm going to let you have your discussion now about the various actions throughout. Hope that you have a good discussion. And we will be back actually in 2 weeks. No education happening next week with it being Easter. So we'll come back with the resurrection actually the Sunday following. So we'll catch you later.